Unaussprechlichen Ramblen.
My name is Marco Visconti, and through this podcast I will invite fellow magicians, occultists, artists, and mystics to ramble along with them and my supporters on Patreon. By doing so, I hope to introduce you all to a much wider perspective on magic than what we get nowadays from occult social media, which is frankly beginning to feel very stale, repetitive, and uninspired. If you want to be part of one of the next episodes, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Marco Visconti by pledging at the Yesod tier or above. And now, on with the unspeakable rumbles. Welcome to episode 4 of Unaussprechlichen Ramblen. Maybe by episode 10 I will be able to do it properly, I wouldn't be able not to eat my own words. I don't know. How is everyone? Good to see you. And tonight we have the most requested guest so far on this little experience here. We have Dea Isidora. Apparently, everybody here really loved when you invited me to your podcast, Ask the Occultist Next Door. That was last December, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Wow. It seems like yesterday, and it seems like 2 years ago at the same time, because it's time.
Mysteries of time, dear. The mysteries of time.
That's very true. Without further ado, I would like, if you can, so who's Dea Isidora? Tell us about yourself, because I mean you are a fascinating character. Like you are a mystic, you're a magician, you're a priestess. Tell us something about you.
This is probably the hardest question of tonight, I think.
It possibly is, right?
Because I consider myself a bit of a shapeshifter in some way or another. Not necessarily in a literal sense, but anyway, I'm by profession an Oxford professor. I studied mythology and classics, and I'm also a high priestess, a teacher, a mystic, a public speaker, and perhaps a spiritual bridge or a guide to a few who feel resonant with my work. I studied Egyptian and Celtic mysticism, which are most close to my blood lineage, and those are the kind of lines I weave into my work, at least most recently. I am a member of various groups that you are aware of, and we discussed them earlier as well. Not necessarily an active member anymore, though.
I feel that is the problem with a lot of us who join groups, and then we realize that maybe it was better to do it on our own, right?
Yeah. But it's the experience of working in a community, working as part of a collective, and then some of us obviously go, okay, I had that experience. Yeah. I learned. I got the T-shirt. I'm moving out of here.
I got the
Not necessary in every case. Not necessary in every case. Yes. So my lineage, I was trained specifically in the cult of Isis. Mm-hmm. So I work with the divine feminine energy through the faces of Isis. Mm-hmm. I also hold a Celtic lineage on my mother's side, so I dabbled in Celtic druidry a little bit, and the metaphysical practices of ancient Irish druidry and folk traditions, if you can call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I love the fact that you describe yourself as a metaphysical bridge, because I really feel that this should really be what teachers in this day and age should be, right? Like, not so much somebody that's so focused on only one practice and never do anything else, because that kind of breeds staticity, if you want, kind of breeds, also the it becomes difficult to evolve any further, and even help people to evolve any further. You mentioned something you spoke about your lineage, and I know, we can read it on your website, and I also know from the chats we had before that blood lineage is something that's very important for you. One question I would like to ask you: how do you define blood lineage without going into the problem that from time to time is connected with the idea of folkish, right? Something that's connected to the blood, as in like almost like nationalistic ideas. And I know that's not the case for you because we have the discussion before, but I would like to hear your perspective on this.
Do you think the nationalistic ideas or the elitist ideas?
Well, let's say nationalistics because elitist. I'm not against it. I'm against everything. And I said, I guess we touched upon this already, but I would like to hear from you again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yes, blood is important for me, and obviously blood lineage through the blood is important for me. I think what is coded in our DNA, the information, the knowledge, the experience of our ancestors, their specific genetic makeup, their consciousness, their thoughts, their practices, their experience, has an effect on us, both biologically and spiritually. So in that respect, blood lineage is important for me. In terms of the aristocratic aspects of coming from a family that is perhaps considered a bit more spiritually involved or less spiritually involved and financially advanced, yeah. whichever ones we're looking at is less really in my focus. With my lineage specifically, I think for me, really digging deep and tracing down the stories of my ancestors, the experience of my ancestors, and how my soul connected to sometimes the stories that they lived or heard was a huge step in my personal evolution, in my spiritual practices, and my understanding of well, who I am, but also what I'm here to do, and what is actually my true north, what's my real medicine. Yeah. Because there's so much information out there, you know, whichever community you are part of, whichever sort of inclination or interest you have, that to really come back to yourself and your ancestral lineage is a very powerful anchor. And you know, we are obviously all mixed now in this world, and we will find some ugly and some pretty things, but that's as part of the learning journey for me. So my quest around blood in terms of my ancestry comes from there. And the other aspect of my blood quest really is about mythogenetics, which is an idea that the stories that are told and experienced, and the folk stories that are experienced on the land you're from, that you have a biological genetic connection to, have a vibrational relationship and a genetic relationship to who you are as a person and how you can evolve.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic that you touch on you know, mythogenesis, as you call it, because I feel that it's really important to almost reclaim these concepts from those who actually make it, you know, a political stance or something like, you know, always like, you know, the bad guys out there, and we've seen a lot of that in recent years. So one thing that we've been looking a lot here in this community in Magic Without Tears, of course, we tend to be more, you know, ceremonial magicians and Thelemites. And we will touch on Babalon because that's a big topic coming up. But another one thing that we've been exploring is, in general, the connection with what we call the other, right? And one way that we've been putting this other on the map is by means of calling it, you know, the Fey host or the fairy or whatever you want to. It's as you know, it's a very, even the name. Let's call them the good people. So I will sleep good tonight, as opposed to being waken up many times. But I know that this is so important for you. What can you tell us about your experience with the good people and the Fey host?
So this is a really long topic, really, just because obviously, as you yourself said, there are different agendas of the past that were sort of washed over and applied upon the folk stories of specifically, I'm referring to Irish, Scottish, Welsh, Eastern European mythology, which is where we sort of encounter the stories and the ideologies and experiences and first-hand accounts of the fairy host or the good people, shining ones, whichever you like. I like shining ones, actually. Or the good company and the rich company and a proud company. That's a good one as well. But anyway, so what I'm really trying to do right now with my work is peel away the layers of the reverence, the early Christian monks, Catholicism, and those stories that were, let's be honest, recorded by sometimes well-meaning, sometimes manipulative figures of history. So we really have a lot of work to do here to dig deep enough in time and in our own resonance and in the records of these stories to actually find a good definition. But for me personally, good people are the elder race of our planet. I consider them both spirit and a manifested being potentially, and I consider them the forever living. So they are not quite like our ancestors, as in we don't have direct connection to them, or not everyone has direct connection to them, but they live in or exist in the ancestral realms. And because of where they are present and the time frame that they were present, they have memory of something that, when we're looking for this other thing, is very powerful, very supportive for our spiritual journey. They have a memory of the original creation.
Yeah, that's
and that memory is valuable for us, and it is exchangeable. And actually, without that remembering, without that knowledge, without that information, okay, how is this world supposed to look like? How does my world supposed to look like? How does my soul experience supposed to be? How does my magical working supposed to be? How am I supposed to relate to this planet, this earth, this nature? How am I supposed to relate to the stars? All this information, they actually hold completely pure. Now, Shining One's consciousness is actually connected to our planet. So they don't have something we have, which is free will, or at least I don't believe they do.
So I'm to act, that. Yeah.
Right. So, and because of that, there is an intact harmony that's still present. And I believe personally that if we can offer healthy exchange for these memories and remembrances, then we can really manifest that information and that knowledge in the here and the now, and potentially salvage our soul and our environment to an extent that we actually have a good experience and a positive future on a sort of spiritual and metaphysical soul level.
How do we do that? How do we get in touch with the shining host? I like the term as well, because so let's use that.
There are ways.
Well, what can you share with us?
There are many ways, actually. But we start by actually cultivating a healthy relationship with nature. We go back to simplicity. We go back to purity. We go back to symbiotic existence. We go back to communicating with the anima in plants, the consciousness in the trees, the consciousness in the animal kingdom, the creature kingdom, right? And we can also connect and encounter these beings and hopefully be guided by them in the astral realms. So there's the very physical manifested experience that we can cultivate, and there's an astral connection that we can also cultivate.
I think what you're telling us here, I think it's crucial, and that is and there's a lesson for every person that thinks that they can do magic only by casting a circle in their home, right? And that's kind of like what we inherited from, I would say, the Masonic structures of magic, right? Like the thing that you can recreate your cosmos inside your lodge room. You cast the circle and you're there. I think it was Peter Gray recently on the podcast with Dara, actually, the Spirit Box. And he mentioned something that I agree with him wholeheartedly. And like in recent times, everybody is talking about embodying magic. I do that a lot as well. Maybe I intend it more in the sense of, reclaiming and learning sex magic, but that's another point. My point is the fact that a lot of people talk about embodying magic and then they never see them in nature. You never, like, everybody is always like, they never go out for a walk. They never try to even, touch, so to say, go out and touch the grass. Well, that's actually it, pretty much.
Pretty much.
I think what you mentioned here, especially the fact that these other whatever, I mean, like we can describe it as you do as this shining ghost, like they exist in the astral, but they have a present in the physical. And if we only go for once, I feel like we miss the connection there. We miss the possibility of actualizing the connection itself. So yeah, that's a very good point. I think I'm gonna skip to another point now. There's so many things we can ask you, and there's so many things we have to ask you. So, I mentioned briefly, and there was a bit of a cue there, about the Masonic structure in Magic. I know that you also are a Freemason. Can you tell us a little bit of your experience as a lady Freemason, and is it something that you would suggest to others? A lot of people here, a lot of women here, actually ask me about my experience in Freemasonry. Of course, my experience is only with male Freemasonry, and it's very. I think there are points of connections and points of difference. So, what would you suggest to anyone who wants to join the Lady Freemasons?
So it depends on how do you see yourself evolving in your magical practices.
Hmm.
If you really feel that your journey needs to learn formulas, methods, techniques that are specific, and you grow from, because ultimately that's what we want to evolve, even magically and spiritually. We don't supposed to be staying in a stagnant old world. And you wanna have an experience that helps your evolution, then I think joining a lodge in your area, or even the Grand Lodge, we're not actually part of it, but as much as we're allowed in. Wrong genitals, and I'm already hinting there what my problem is. I would recommend it. I think if you see yourself as a woman, as a practitioner who will follow a Masonic formula, learning those practices really teach you a certain kind of discipline. It really teach you how to work in a group, how to really work with other people's energies and whatever they bring in, and still hold your own. And that's valuable. In terms of your future, I don't really think that female masonry is going anywhere. So there's going to be a point, or it was for me, where I felt that this is time for me to sort of step a little bit back from being active. And I still value a lot of the information I learned. I think they were very important for my personal journey with discipline. Because I am the one who goes off with the fairies, right? Quite literally. So to learn discipline from a Masonic structure was very important for me. But Freemasonry is a little bit of a structure of a past, and we do need to learn the past to inform the future. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to be a long-term survival plan, that female masonry have a long-term survival plan. I can't see that. I can't see it particularly grow either, at least not this side of the hemisphere. So and of course the my personal experience with this, we're still not officially necessarily recognized by all the Grand Lodges. There's still this gender separation. It's a layer of unspoken or spoken, depends on who you speak to, sexism involved. These are ideologies and structures that we have to transcend.
You know, something that I can tell you, I can tell everybody here. Like, there's been a huge push in recent years to give the two orders of female Freemasonry more visibility. The backlash from the older members has actually made me wonder if I even wanted to keep being a Freemason, because I was like, do I want to be associated with people that can be so violently misogynistic, right? At the same time, I do think that if Freemasonry, as we know it, has to survive, it will have to go mixed, like like in Grand Orient Freemasonry or Memphis Misraim Freemasonry, because if not, it's not going to survive really. I agree with you that there's a lot of value in learning the structure, but as like at the end of the day, the structure is needed in order that, for me at least, that then you can get away with the structure and fly free with the fairies or with demons, or depends on whatever you want to fly with, pretty much. So, in our previous conversation on your podcast, we discussed a lot the idea of divine feminine and the idea of Babalon, which is, of course, this massive concept that it's very often misunderstood in Telema. And for those of you who haven't heard the podcast with Dea before, I will put it into the description below as usual, so you can go listen to that as well. And one thing that I've been trying to establish here in Glastonbury, and it's a very long process that's been fraught with problems thanks to COVID and thanks to other reasons. It's been establishing one of the cloisters of Ecclesia Gnostica Universalis called the Babalon Magdalene cloister, and my point being always like to try and, if not mix together, because there's identities there, of course, but try to make to show the analogy between the Thelemic Babalon in her more earthly aspect and the concept of Mary Magdalene, the figure of Mary Magdalene. And one of the questions came from Gemma, from Logan, from Catherine. Everybody would very be keen to hear you discuss how you engage in embodied and devotional practice to the Mary Magdalene aspect of the divine feminine, and see if you feel it connected to Babalon. This is the big question.
The last one is the big question. Okay, I'm gonna do this backwards. Yes, I do. So I'm answering I think there is a relationship with Mary Magdalene and Babalon. And I almost would go as far that if we hone down a sort of concept or an ideology for Babalon that carries within herself this divine unconditional love, this openness to agape, as we discussed in our earlier post, and I think that is actually what manifests in Mary Magdalene at that specific incarnation of her soul that we all know about, and that is actually a frequency she carries, taps into, and then passes on, despite obvious scholarly challenges along time, to us and to her disciples, and then later on to her partner, and then go on and forth to perhaps. This is a kind of consciousness that today is coming back to our awareness. It's very present right now. So I'd like to say that there are divine feminine faces that have good marketing strategies. And I think Mary Magdalene has a very good marketing strategy because she taps into the most powerful human concept, that which is unconditional love. And let's be honest, most of us don't really know how does that look, and most of us don't know how unconditional love manifests, because our concept of love still, and despite our trying and devotion to love, we still end up engaging in conditional connections.
Yep. Literally nailed the idea of what Babylon is. That the idea that Babylon receives everything and receive the all. It's an element of unconditional reception that it's very difficult to understand. And I guess from a Kabbalistic perspective, the concept of can we even discuss the supernals? Can we even discuss Bina? Can we even discuss? I mean, like from my Thelemic perspective, in general, the Bina you discuss, it's not the Bina because it's it's something that's outside the realm of manifestation. It's outside. It's up across the abyss, and that's where Babylon is. So, do you think that if somebody, like you say that there's various divine feminines, and I agree with you absolutely. Do you think that we could use the more earthly and closer to us aspect of the Mary Magdalene to start approaching something like Babylon, which is more distant from us?
I think there is a possibility we can, but collectively, if we're facing an issue with Mary Magdalene, that due to her extreme popularity, she's already have many faces and understanding attached to her name that perhaps not taking you to that direction.
Yeah.
So it very much depends on whether we can in any way claim Mary Magdalene in connection to that more earthly emanation, from maybe, you know, how she enters most. I'm going to speak for women, and I'm sure a man in this group can relate to in a way. She appears to us as a womb priestess. To a lot of people, she appears as a womb priestess, as a sexual feminine, as a priestess wife, right? But it's always in relation to a masculine figure of history. She is not independently in our current trajectory, in her current sort of embodiment and how people see her and speak about her. She does not appear as an independent consciousness. She doesn't appear as an independent feminine anchor. She does not appear as a wisdom keeper and as a teacher. She either a feminist or a sexually empowered woman. And I think breaking her out of those cages, which we've seen Babalon being put into in so many stories, and so she's almost going through her own Babalon journey, historically speaking, in a later timeline. She's been a whore, now she's a feminist, now she's healing women's womb, and eventually, hopefully, she will not be objectified by horny old man. she'll skip that stage, and then she'll come out of that sort of bracketeering, and we can really look at her as a concept of divine unconditional love. And I see people speak about her as that, but what I don't really see is that actually understood and felt. Because even using the words that we have been using just now, is that we're trying to understand the divine feminine as a concept. And I really strongly believe that the divine feminine cannot be logically understood. I think the divine feminine has to be experienced. She has to be felt, and she has to be physically experienced, which is where the sexual mysteries come in, and she has to be emotionally experienced, and she has to be astrally experienced. So we can use pretty words and write logical statements and brand her again, but ultimately we have to integrate that experience. And one of the questions I think was about my embodiment of Mary Magdalene. I really feel that Mary's energy in that divine feminine consciousness comes out in my teaching, but it comes out in how I relate to my students. It comes out how I relate to the outside world. It also comes and embodied in me in a way at times when I have to relate to other human beings.
Well,
Can I respond? It's not a spiritual practice for me, it's a lived practice.
Yeah.
I think, invoking Mary in a ritual, which I have done and I will do, and everyone else will have a different experience based on where their consciousness is powerful, but ultimately it's your lived experience of that unconditional love that she holds and anchors that will actually create the true embodiment. So bringing her close to the earthly emanation of Babalon will happen when we can really move with her. We can really feel her. We can really anchor her in our body, in our bodies, in our hearts, in our emotional intelligence instead of in our logical mind.
I mean, I think we mentioned this in our previous chat about that try to go always back to the rational side, or it's really like is to keep giving the beast power as opposed to letting Babylon speak on top of the beast at last. So since we spoke about the embodiment, Babylon, of course, and we mentioned the idea that maybe a way to start understanding this embodiment is through the sexual mysteries. There's a question from Ryan, and he was asking that when you were on Jake Coburn's podcast, you were actually negating a lot of what people consider sex magic to be. So what do you say? Do you define sex magic? And by the way, I agree with you, obviously. What do you define sex magic as? And what mindsets and practices are important for beginners? Or maybe even for those with some amount of experience? What preparatory work is required before engaging in such practice?
Okay, I like this question. Um, and I had to really quickly listen to the podcast with Jake. Like, what did I say? I'm negating the concept of sex magic. Kind of, but not really. What I'm negating, or what I'm sort of saying in that podcast, and I'm going to repeat that here to an extent just to give context to those who didn't listen, is that I really don't like how sexual magic is really portrayed as a manifestation tool, as opposed to a sacred ritual practice. And if you Google sex magic now, the first thing that will come up is Teen Vogue, how to manifest your dreams with sex magic. And I'm not even kidding. Go do it, because I did it today. And that is what I'm against, and that is what I negated, is that if we sort of have this new wave of sexual magic out there that is solely and singularly focused on manifestation of desires and abundance, and we all know that when we chase desires with life force and energy, we manifest other things. Yep. But perhaps we receive some level of our desired outcome. Yes, we can generate money. Yes, you can generate money directing your sexual energy. So what? You can probably pull in experiences, offers, work, anything physically manifested using your sexual energy, but you will pull in other things as well. So where I'm at really with sexual magic is really to sort of go back to the origin of sexual magic and the original intention of cultivating this practice is to exchange life force energy, which is a form of source magic. And when we practice source magic, ultimately we do it to get closer to source. Kind of gives it away in the name. So I practice sex magic in a way, and this is what I teach and that is what I cultivate, that helps your soul evolution in a non-selfish way, and it gets you closer to source. It gets you closer to the thing, to God, to your highest emanation. And that individual, when evolved such way through these sexual practices, then has a better influence on the world. And I really believe that a good practitioner of sex magic should use their sexual force energy to create better outcomes for the collective also. But that comes a lot later. We're going in a sort of greed and self-serving path when it comes to sex magic. And because we're talking about sexual life force energy, and we know that the sexual energy in this current world, in this reality, is super corrupted, we can really stumble into some deep holes, as Samael Onweir would say, you will grow the devil's tail. If you're into that stuff, then go for it. It's not how I practice, and it's not what I teach.
Once again, you touch on things that we were discussing a few days ago. One thing that I made very clear is that in our community, I kind of don't want to do magic for result, and of course this kind of destroys my reach, if you want, because everybody say, hey, let's manifest this, let's manifest.
I ain't getting anything.
Exactly. Well, for me, my point is actually that was exactly what you said. Everything that we do, it's really theurgy in the sense, theurgy and internal alchemy in the sense of bettering yourself, and by bettering yourself, you ideally start bettering the world around you. Yes, you can use the occasional sigil, which usually it's fueled by squiggles and other things that I'm not going to mention. But the point is that to what end? You really nailed it, and thank you so much for being like so eloquent about that.
Well, that was also I just want to finish answering this
Oh, please,
question as well,
absolutely.
because they were asking about, if I remember right, practices and what can you kind of do.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, don't do at-home sex magic.
This is interesting. What do you mean by that?
Don't just sort of go, okay, honey, you and I are gonna get down to it tonight, and we're gonna practice sex magic. I'm gonna do this, and we're gonna follow this book. We're gonna cultivate our sexual energy. I mean, you're gonna have fun, but you can also sort of invoke certain experiences and energies that you'd rather not have in your field. So cultivating and preparing yourself for practice has sort of a mind, body, and soul layer that I encourage people. And the first step is contemplate unconditional love. And I think I said that at Jake's podcast as well. Is the first step to begin your practices is contemplating what love means to you, because that love you will need to feel and express and channel through your entire energy body. You can call it the chakra system, or the Kabbalistic tree of life, whatever, doesn't really matter, because ultimately you want that sexual energy force to travel through every power center of your body, and you want to feel that it's traveling through. You want to have a sense that it's traveling. You feel where it's perhaps blocked, hopefully not, and you want to circulate that energy with your partner. And that partner should be someone who knows you very well, and someone who understands what's happening, right? Because if it doesn't, then we're going on a spiritual ritual abuse side of things, and we don't want to do that. Someone who is prepared and capable of perhaps doing the same. And you can practice moving this energy without a partner. You can just do it on your own. So that would be the physical aspect of it, but you need to know how your sexual energy behaves. For men, I really suggest that you learn to withhold your seed. Right.
Yeah, correct. I agree.
And that is super simple. It's breath work. It's not that hard. And a little bit it is, and it's supposed to be. Yeah. Because these experiences and these magical gifts are not bestowed upon people just because, right?
And if any man on the call want to learn, see me after class. I can teach you one thing or two how to do it.
There you go. So for women, we got an easier job. Let's be honest, because our sexual energy does not leave our body at a moment of orgasm. So, but we still need to focus on our heart and mind space, because our emotional field, if it's conflicted, uncomfortable, in any way infiltrated, and our mental space is in any way infiltrated, then actually we are the manifestors. So in a couple ritual, you really are the one who projects the energy. And if you're not clear and if you're not anchored, then you will be almost single-handedly responsible for a lot of mess, right? So clarity in the heart, clarity in the emotional field, complete honesty, complete unconditional love needs to be felt, and your mind needs to be clear. So practices that are meditative, wall gazing, I really like. You have to actually achieve at least a couple of moments of clarity within your mental field. And for women with chattery minds, that is a super big challenge. I need to also touch on, for women especially, but applies to men as well, sexual traumas. If you carry a lot of sexual traumas, those need to be either managed during the practice or cleared, ideally cleared. We all have it, okay? Nobody's immune because we're the traumatized generation, all of us, unless if you're like 600-700 years old, but even then probably. So we all have it. It's like just nothing special about it. It's not unique. It's very important that we're clearing those traumatized energies. It's in our awareness, so that if it comes up, we know how to handle it, because that cannot be remanifested when we're circulating sexual energy. So those are kind of the building blocks that each partner needs to work on. And yes, you can practice sex magic without a partner as well. So, but you still have to do all those preparatory practices before you even thinking about. allowing your sexual energy, your source, to go anywhere outside of your field.
Something that you mentioned, the fact that both partners needs to be adepts, need to know what they're doing. It's also the reason why, for all of you are interested in Telemann and our old friend Aleister Crowley, is the reason why when you read the Aleister Crowley diaries, you realize that 75-80% of his magical practice, his sex magical practice, never bore any fruit, because he was engaging, with prostitutes, with people that he didn't care for. He was a sexual abuser in many ways, and this is one of the big thing that can be said in Thelemic circles. No, Crowley, you can say that about Crowley. The proof is in the pudding. Like, his sex magic was not successful most of the times. So that's the point, right? He was very honest in writing it down for us to have the evidence. But yeah, I mean, sex magic has to be done with a partner. That the partner does, like, know what they're doing. Like, as you must know what you're doing. This also kind of invalidate, I think, a lot of the chaos magic approach that every sigil will work. I don't know about that. This is why most sigils don't work. Not because the technique is not valid, but because you're not able to generate the energy needed for that to give birth to that sigil. So yeah, it's a bit more complicated than just having fun.
Absolutely. There's also another element, and that relates to what you said about the sigil, that a lot of people are actually perfectly capable of generating the energy. But we need to hold control in a moment of ecstasy. And the two is a very sort of paradoxical experience.
Yeah.
Because ecstasy implies that you're letting go completely, right? That is almost like a necessary component, and yet you need to control the energy itself. And I think sometimes those who can generate the energy simply just direct it to the wrong place.
Yeah.
So something will manifest, something will be created. Every sexual encounter has an energy child. Yeah. Every single sexual encounter.
I mean, where the concept of the Eucharist comes from. While the bread is white,
yeah.
while the wine
is red.
While the wine is red, exactly. I was about to say. Those are specific fluids that need to be eaten. Okay. Gemma was asking if you can actually talk a little bit on example of your training for priestesses. How do you, and also if you have any particular writers that influence your practice, or is it similar to what, for instance, Amodali's writes about? She had a more direct connection with the energy and vital force of the divine feminine. And also, if it's possible to hear a little about the myth lines you follow regarding those myth animals of dragon, serpent, and lion.
Okay. How do I do? How are we doing on time?
I mean, we're fine on time. It's more about I whenever
your mind. Okay. So in terms of what I teach and what I practice is obviously the same thing. Ideally, it should be. So my priestess practices really now are anchored in a certain level of ceremonial magic and ritual magic. It is cultivated with my co-creation and relationship with the fairy host and with nature itself. And there's another layer of embodiment through teaching, creating, creative work, movement, temple keeping. So all those elements really come into it. And that is what I teach. I train priestesses, or I have an apprenticeship course where we really go through the sort of mental aspect of understanding a divine feminine. We study cosmology, we study Egyptology, we study a divine feminine emanation in all cultures, actually, or I weave all cultures in. If I see there's a relevant face in a different tradition, then we need to be aware. I think a good priestess is educated in the history and myth of her art. First step. We also do on these courses a lot of soul work. So I make sure that my students have a good understanding of the certain layers and aspects of their souls. They are aware of their highest emanation and form, and they are aware of their sort of most anchored truth, people call it the true north, right? Or your Ren name in Egyptian practices, we call it the Ren name, like the sound, the vibration of your creational moment. So I really take people back to connecting those soul aspects and elements, which most human manifested in bodies today have lost along the way, whether it was willed away, given away, or taken, either or. So there's a large part. And then we move on to the ceremonial and ritual practices. We move on to the creation of certain offerings. We go on to how we can cultivate these practices in a 21st century, because obviously some of these things make sense from a mythological and ritual perspective, but in practice we're a bit out of time. So that's kind of the first stage of the training, and I really then let people hands go just for a bit and let them experience life and let things come through that for them. And if they are still feel anchored in that path, that they want to be devoted to the priestess path, then they can dedicate a couple months later. So that's kind of the process. I come from, as I said earlier, I come from the cult of Isis. So my formulas and training comes from that sort of Egyptian cosmology, this sort of Egyptian ritual magic, which is actually not the same as most Tala might know as Egyptian ritual magic.
Oh, absolutely not.
There are cross references, like the names are on point.
Sometimes, not all the time.
Sometimes they're a bit Romanized, but
exactly.
So it's not the same, but there are obviously somewhat related. I've studied a lot of books. I'm an academic, so books are kind of my thing. I've got certain writers that have influenced me. I studied, I like Naglavska is one of my favorite writers for Isis Magick by Isidora Forrest in terms of ritual practices. I think what she created, even though it's neo-pagan, is phenomenal. And I study traditional Egyptian text. I study scriptures. I used to work in the British Museum, so it was fairly easy for me to access some of this material. I've studied the Nag Hammadi text and a lot of other materials as well that are more Gnostic. So now I do have those sort of influences, and also, yes, to the other part of the question, most of my experiences that make it into my actual lived embodiment come from spirit directly, or the goddess herself, if you like that word, directly. So I do a lot of my work in the astral and the dream realms.
So that's the same for them. When it comes to those particular three animals, like the dragon, the serpent, the lion. That's what you mean. Like it's connections with that came from the goddess or something like that, right?
Yes, to an extent. So I consider the lion and a serpent are initiatory stages of an initiation of a myth, a certain path, a certain passage. But I also connect to these as like archetypes or guides, right? So they manifest to me as guides with their very specific information. My relationship with the lion was lions actually in Africa with the white lions was super accidental, and they really brought me back from like a near-death experience.
Wow.
Literally. And then I started cultivating the lion energy and studying the Zulu tribal wisdom. I was working with Linda Tucker at the time, who is the founder of the White Lion Protection Trust. So I was actually working with these animals, and I'd done the same with snakes and serpents. A bit harder to do it with dragons, because it's not like you can bump into them. But I would actually work with the animal in a spirit guide form. I would work with the consciousness. I would work with the sort of actual manifested creature. And also the traditions, the serpentine traditions and the serpent path, which is one of the oldest existing mythological, mythical, and magical tradition, all connecting almost every ancient spiritual path.
This is a question from Lawrence, and I'm gonna take the last two questions, but because again, we've been covering a lot of ground here. Lawrence is asking if you can tell us a little bit more about the Order of the Black Rose. Apart from being the name of your coven, is there a significance of the symbolism in the Black Rose? Does it any way relate to the Celtic legend of the Rushin Duv, concerning the Druids in Ireland who possessed sacred knowledge and were robed in red and black with a black rose as emblem on the robe?
So the Russian Druid really means little dark rose or dark rose. And I'm familiar with the Druidic traditions. So the answer is kind of yes and no. So the reason the order is called the Black Rose is because the anima of the Black Rose, the consciousness of the Black Rose is transformational. That is the actual energy the Black Rose carries in all traditions that work with the rose is the moment before death, the moment before birth. So those are the kind of energies that we tapped into and are working with in the Order of the Black Rose. And it is an order that follows Celtic Druidic sex magic, which is different than the sex magic we were talking about earlier, and it's very specific. So there is that Celtic Druidic element, but the order wasn't named based on that mythological story, as much as I really like it. I think there's some beautiful poems written about it as well. That's worth. Actually, there's a song too. It's a good song.
Is the order open, or is it invitation only? It's only by invitation.
The order is only by invitation, and the order is actually decided to take a year break for my sake, so I can finish my book. And I can actually focus on the work I'm sort of deep dived into right now. So right now we're taking a sabbatical, but no, the order is invitation only, and that will stay that way because of the nature of the work that we're doing in the order.
It's something that it's an approach that we took also in EGU, as in, like, I think we discussed this before. Like, I really don't believe into open doors order. Like, hey, as long as you find two sponsors, you're good to go, because that never works out. Usually, it's about, well, it was supposed to be that those two sponsors should know you and vouch for you, but most of the time it's just people you met at the pub. So hey, that's not
works for some people. I don't think it's really a good ground to found a sex magic group on there.
Yeah, that's
so we didn't use this approach. I think for some orders this works. I'm not completely against open ritual orders or covens, just for this, because how specific the nature of and what how the tradition is followed. It has to be selective. It doesn't work, and it's no point maintaining and putting effort into an order if
it's going to fall apart. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. We have time for one more question. Okay. And where is this? Yes, this one from Peter. So Peter is asking, what advice do you have for a solo practitioner who wants to connect to the magical currents of a place? How might they find a good location for such endeavor? What might they do? What might they do to connect to the place once they know it? And on also a little corollary, and given your personal connection to both Celtic and Egyptian tradition, where do you feel there is the strongest overlap or points of connections between this tradition? I guess maybe also in place, you know.
Okay, this is a really.
It's a massive. we finished.
Massive question. I was this one sentence. Okay, so to go back to the sort of first part of the. I could actually start with the end, but no, let's start with the first part of this this question.
This is a chapter of a book, more.
Okay, I'm gonna start with the end actually, because that makes a little bit more sense to build it up like that. And if you want to just like make sure we covered everything, right? So yes, so I work with both the Celtic tradition, which is a sort of Druidic tradition, and the Egyptian And the reason why is because they both actually in my blood. I'm half Irish, Hungarian, and I have Arabic, Egyptian blood. So it kind of came naturally just whilst doing my sort of ancestry research, as I discussed earlier. The first place I look is how is magic practiced, right? So it's almost like a natural succession, and I think there is actually very strong connecting points between the two. And some of those connecting points are places, but more so ideologies and beliefs. So if you look at the Celts, and I'm specifically going to refer to the Irish and the Gaelic Celts, right? There are European Celtic tribes as well. So Celtic is not limited to just the islands of the United Kingdom. But the Irish Celts arrived to Ireland. They weren't there to begin with, from very likely a Sumerian tribe. So we know has strongly intertwined the Sumerian and the Egyptian tradition there. And in terms of religious beliefs, in terms of their connection to the sun, they solar worship, in terms of how they were animistic and recognized spirit in every living being. Those threads are present in both traditions. The work with deities is actually the only real difference. The concept of Egyptian worship is very devotional, right? It's all about keeping temple space. It's all about cultivating that very hierarchical relationship with the deities, whilst the Celtic and the Irish Celtic traditions are focusing on co-creation. Mm-hmm. There is no pyramid scheme. We're working as a team. I've got something you need, you got something I need. We put our two and two together and we're gonna do the work. It's very, very work focused, but it's also healing focused. The Irish Celtic magical traditions actually focus on healing our planet. Mm-hmm. And that is where those locations come in. So if you look at sort of sacred sites, right, I'm assuming that is what the question was referring to. Spiritually charged places are spiritually charged because there is this huge time frame where people, practitioners, heart, souls, and spirit goes there to charge it with their intention, their thoughts, their energy. And then sometimes, of course, they do that because there is a historical event that happened in that specific sacred site. Sometimes it's because, you know, we can be aware of ley lines, and there are certain ley lines that are connected, and there is actually a stratospheric energy that's charged there, right? So there's an electric charge to the field of that place. Stone circles are a good example of that. But sometimes these places are actually charged by our intention and our consciousness. And if we're praying at the same spot for 6,000 years, that spot's going to be powerful, because it's charged by your prayer. So that is actually how you work with the energy. So for a complete beginner, is entering any kind of sacred religious site, whether it's in alignment with your beliefs or traditions or not, should be done with respect. You declare who you are, why are you there, and do you have permission to enter or not? And if you get a firm no, don't force yourself in there, because especially fairy sites and especially stone circles, you're going to get an ass kicking. and an etheric one of those, and they're not pleasant. So knowing who we are, knowing our boundaries with these places, then the next step is to work with the spirit that is still alive and reside within those places. Sometimes these spirits are playful. Sometimes they're tricksters, sometimes they're super grumpy, right? Because they don't actually like you as or
humanity in general, yeah.
Or humanity in general, that's a big one, yeah. And they're just like, oh, you're one of those. And then you need to prove yourself, right? You can work with the energy and these spirits by making those exchanges, making offerings, and just know that they see your heart and they see your truth. So as honest as you enter, the better chance you got to actually experience co-creation. If it's a place that has very heavy history And your intention and work is actually about clearing and cleansing, that you really have to understand what went down and what happened. And sometimes psychic abilities came in there, sometimes communication comes in there. That's like a very, very deep devotional, mystical, magical work. Some people do just that in their entire life. I'm not one of them. I have my favorite sites that I cultivate relationship with, but I don't have the calling to sort of travel around and like clear these spaces.
Well, thank you so much. I think we covered everything, and I mean, here in Glastonbury, I mean, this is this is the center of a lot of things here. So there's definitely like, oh, some of you that were here at the beginning of the month, of last month, because time is weird as usual, know what it's like to to go on the tour and connect with the spirit of the place there, and or even walking around the springs and whatnot. There's definitely a very important point to be made, that again, to connect to the beginning of the discussion and find a perfect circle to close it up, to embody your practice, to go out in the world and do magic in the world. Yeah, you can start in your room, you can start in your temple, you can invoke and evoke everything in your space, but then we've got to remember that there's the word out there is still out there, and there's still like, and the wisdom, magical wisdom, is found out there. On that note, thank you, Dea, for being with us tonight. Thank you so much. Where can we find you? Where can we find you online?
Thank you so much for having me. You can find me online at priestessdea.com. Most of my offerings are on there. You can email me and reach out to me. I like to talk to people, so I usually am pretty good at replying. You can find me on Instagram as I am Dea Isidora, and priestessdea@gmail.com is my email address. So all those places, and just
Fantastic.
connect, reach out, ask your questions. I also have a podcast on Spotify called Ask the Occultist Next Door, which you can listen to, which our conversation is on there, that we were referring earlier. And right now I'm in a very sort of deep dive creational process of finishing some big projects. So I kind of offer one-on-one work and classes, and I still train my priestesses, but I haven't been really putting anything massive out there for people to tap into. But yeah, there's plenty out there.
Fantastic. We're definitely waiting for the book to come out. It sounds like good.
I do too.
Okay, well, thank you for being with us tonight, and we'll see you to the next ramble. Do what the will shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love and the will.